I'm Nick Collins. I'm a BPM consultant. I've been working in the space for about 4 years, and in that time I've really spent most of my time focused on building user interfaces, coaches.
And I'm Brian Schlosser, software architect for BP3. I've done a lot of UI in the past as a UI development lead, both on making custom UI frameworks as well as the end user interface applications. So to give you guys a little background on how we got here today, Nick and I spent quite a bit of time working on Browser's Portal together, and one of the efforts we did there was trying to figure out, okay, how can we make it so that when we have to do customizations in Browser's Portal, it's easy to take pieces out, put pieces in, and that kind of led us along lines of modularity in the Browser's Portal. And after a while, we started going, these modular concepts that we know from just doing good software development apply really well to the UI as well. So that leads us into, what do we do with the modular interface? And, how do we start looking at it? And if you think in terms of some older software development paradigms of model view controller and stuff, some of it was trying to get that separation with UI. And now with the Java frameworks that we have available today, the capabilities of browsers and stuff, it's even easier to make a complete separation from the back end and the UI. But today we're really going to focus on, okay, we're in the UI, how do we break the UI apart? And we're going to give it a BPM-centric view because I think that's what we're all here for today.
Right, so yeah, today is really going to focus more on coach views, but again, this does apply to other things like Angular directives. We're going to discuss the benefits, why you should really be building your interfaces in a modular fashion. We're going to actually discuss what a module is and how to identify one, and also just a little methodology that we've kind of built along the way. The science, what we could get is close to a science out of building interfaces. So let's dive into it. So first of all, what is a module? UI module, usually, and especially in the BPM world, it's you have a piece of data, you want to bind that to HTML, you want to update that view, that HTML when the data changes, and you also want to update the data if the HTML changes in the sense that a user types the input on a form. Really basic, really simple concept, really just happening with the latest JavaScript technologies that are making this much more simple, and it really caters to the ability to apply the same methodologies that you use on your code bases to the user interface.
Yeah. And I don't remember if you mentioned it there, Nick, but IBM BPM has stuff in it already for that. It's a coach view. Your coach view is your unit of modularity. So, and we'll go through here and say, talk about the different coach views and how we can string them together to even separate logic you have about how you retrieve the data from the back end versus the UI as well when we talk about it.
Right. So why should you be doing this? Number one, reusability. We don't want to rebuild things that we've already done in the past. Adaptability, just the ability to change without having to completely redo or rewrite. Quality, it's much easier to test a simple small piece and then reuse that piece later without having to retest. Simplicity, just a logical breakdown of usually much more complex screen that's necessary to deliver value. It makes it just simpler, and it's usually a good first place to start splitting things up. And then speed. Having these small components that you've built and tested before takes a lot of the rework out of it.
Right.
So,
if you've been paying attention, you started to hear a theme too from all of us of you have to start doing things and evolve it. I think we've all seen the code where, okay, we start making a product, it gets big, it gets messy, and everybody thinks, all right, it's time to bite the bullet, we need to rewrite it. Which, yeah, you can do, but what do you end up doing? You make another big thing, and eventually you go, all right, time to bite the bullet, I got to rewrite it. Which modularity for us is taking those things and saying, okay, instead of having to rewrite it, can we start carving pieces out? And as we start carving pieces out, we can say, okay, now I can replace that piece. And maybe some of the pieces themselves I just need to rewrite it. But sometimes it's also, okay, let me carve it out so it's a separate piece on its own, and I can start to evolve it.
So how do we do that, right? So this is just our basic methodology. Number one, it's understanding the ask, the big picture, understanding what at the end needs to be delivered to, just an idea of what needs to be delivered to deliver value. It's identifying the major pieces of that, just logical collection of pieces, It's a low investment attempt. Just take a stab at what you know. The thing that's most solid in that blurry picture, just start building it. You don't need to know all of the details. It's showing that and getting feedback. It's then retrospectively taking what's been confirmed and breaking out pieces even further. So I think the refactor piece of this is huge. So we're going to go into an example, and we're going to kind of just show you how we apply our methodology. So number one, understanding the ask. So for this example, let's just say that the ask was, we know there's an accounts team. They need a dashboard to quickly access their contacts. So Ryan, from this, what's the next thing that you would do usually?
Right, you got to start and say, okay, I want to understand more about what you're really going to be doing. Because I can say, okay, you want a contacts list? I can go build you one. I don't need to know anymore. And you can build them a contacts list, but it may not be exactly what they need. This helps inform some of the things like, where are we going to put different widgets on the screen? Because which ones are most important to them? What do they come in and do on a regular basis?
This is just mocked up. This is this low investment attempt. So once we start building this, we're going to start thinking about the pieces, right? We know it's going to be a list of contacts. We have an idea of what the data is going to look like. We know there's going to be columns that represent this, and we're going to start thinking, are these pieces that I have? Are these pieces that I need to build? Is this something that I've already built before?
So now it's time, we do a demo.
Take it back, yeah.
Which, some of the stuff, maybe it's in the first meeting where they asked for the contact list and we quick sketched it out and started doing that. Maybe a couple of us, one pulls out a laptop and we can fairly quickly put this into HTML or in the process designer and show you, is this it? Yes, it is. Okay, great. Do we get any feedback of, well, you guys did first name, last name. We would like last name, first name. Some of those are things that are good to note because if we're doing it right, they're easy to change later. Yeah, and then we have the final discussion of, are we on the right track? Where do we go?
Yep. And it's, again, because it's kind of a low investment attempt, it's not like we're throwing much away. We also know that we're still going to need this thing that is a contact list. We may just have to reorder. We may need to have to reformat. But the things that we have to change, we didn't spend much time building in the first place. So what are some of the things that we're looking for? If you find yourself copying and pasting huge chunks of code, if you find yourself saying, I've written this before, that's the time to turn that thing that you copied into a module. Yeah. Trying to do too many different things. The show hide. This is what happens. This is the most common thing is we start with, let's say, a simple request form. Oh, well, Bob and the accounts team has a very similar form. Let's put all of their fields, and then we'll show hide it based on who's looking at it. Try to stay away from that. Another thing is formatted strings in the data model. Anytime you look in and you see customer name, customer display name on dashboard 2, those are views. Those should be coach views. They should be split out. It's just different representations on how your data looks. So some basic things. Pull data sources out of your modules. It's not a bad thing to have. We talked about what composes a UI module or a coach view. There's nothing wrong with having a headless coach view, a coach view that has no HTML, but does the mediating to get data. These modules shouldn't be aware of their context. You really shouldn't be, do your best to avoid things like calling a specific ID in a different coach view, right?
Right. Well, but you can go into style things too. Of the widget should be able to live by itself. Right. It shouldn't know that, well, if I'm on this coach view or in this coach, I do this, and if I'm in this other one, I do this. That's something that the next level above it should be taking control of.
Exactly. Yes. And another thing is communication between your modules should be done through your variables. That's the main publish subscribe method. Mm-hmm. Don't try to broadcast events. Don't try to catch events out from one coach view to another. And then the retrospective nature, right? The iterative nature is after you've built something, just think, could this be used? This makes sense within the context of my screen. Does it make sense in the context of my application? Mm-hmm. Does it make sense in the context of my organization? How far out can I break this? It's something that after everything I build, I usually ask myself, where does this make sense? What small changes could I make to this module so it could be used outside of my application?
Right. And one of the things I meant to touch on another screen before was, as you're doing it too, if you do the reflection on, okay, who's using this? How are they using it? if you've built your modules, you can start rearranging stuff on the screen really easily, dropping stuff off, putting other stuff on. It makes it easy to build a coach view for, Bob works this way and Frank works another way, or their personas do anyway. I can start saying, okay, I'm just going to take pieces off and put pieces on and make something that works the best for them.
Yeah. It's about getting to I think, a couple levels. The smallest logical block, usually. It's a great way to drive it. How do I identify what makes sense to be a module? A lot of times you'll have a very complex data structure that you're binding to. That data structure will usually pretty good representation of what views you'll need to build.